Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944.
Hello, welcome to Part 1 of Tutorial 4 from the Atlantic Wall Campaign Game series. This video is the first of two parts covering the setup of the initial German forces and the game turn record track for the June 6th AM game turn. Now, just a few things before we begin. First, this series uses the full logistic and strategic rules. No simplified or optional rules or optional airdrops will be used. Second, all references will either look like this for the October 2016 version of the Atlantic Wall scenario rules, or like this for the July 2020 version of the GOS system rules. Third, at times, Tutorial 4 presents a lot of written information on screen. Please make frequent use of the pause button to make sure you don't miss anything. Fourth, I recommend downloading the game's Vassal module, which you can get for free from Decision Games. It'll be extremely useful if you have any questions about the game setup. And fifth, whenever possible, errata counters will appear instead of the original counters they replace. I'll indicate whenever this happens so you'll know why the counter you see on screen doesn't match the one that came with the boxed game. If you have any questions about errata counters, including how to get them, you can download my guide from Board Game Geek. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get started. Okay, in this section of the video, we'll begin setting up the initial German forces for the June 6th AM game turn. To get started, first go to the full logistic and strategic rules for the campaign game in section 39.4.0 of the Atlantic Wall Rulebook, and then go down to section 39.4.3 Setup. Most of this will be covered in future videos, but the part we are concerned with is here. German forces are set up in accordance with Atlantic Wall 38.8.2, which is a reference to this section of Scenario 6, also used in the campaign game. Everything here is important, except this paragraph, which you can ignore. It refers to Scenario 6, but for the campaign game, all maps are used, including maps D, E, and F, and the strategic map, and all German forces that start on those maps should be placed. Alright, the first step, here, is to set up all of the WN and STP counters representing fixed fortifications that were part of the Atlantic Wall. They are placed in the hex indicated on the back of their counters here. WN33, for example, is placed in hex C3707 here. The counter for STP Douvres, which is a little hard to read, is placed in hex C4311 northwest of Douvres-la-Delivrande here. Now, all these counters are placed on maps A, B, and C, generally with lower numbers to the east and higher numbers to the west. If you want, you can organize them from low to high according to their designations before placing them, so you won't have to spend as much time walking around the table. I should also mention that all WN and STP units start the campaign activated, meaning they'll be able to provide fire support right from the beginning of the June 6th AM game turn. Okay, the second step is to place all of the German forces listed in section 38.8.2, and to do that, you'll have to learn to read these entries. Now, the first component of almost all of them is a hex coordinate with a letter indicating which map sheet from A to F the counter will be placed on. The next two numbers, the column on that map sheet, and the last two numbers, the row. Whenever there are two entries but only one coordinate, both units are placed in the same hex. Good. Now, to identify which counter an entry refers to, you'll need to find its unit information, which is located in some combination of three places on counters. The upper left-hand corner might contain the unit's company, battalion, regiment, brigade, type of unit it represents, or the caliber of its guns. The upper right-hand corner indicates the unit's higher division, corps, or army formation. In some cases, further information can be found in the center of the counter, in or above the unit type symbol. Entries in section 38.8.2 usually begin with the upper left-hand corner and/or center of the counter, followed by the upper right-hand corner, but there's a lot of variation in how entries are ordered, so in some cases you'll have to look around a bit to find what you need. Here are some examples of entries and the units they refer to. Feel free to pause the video and compare them. Alright, and just a few tips. It's helpful to first organize the counters by division, so even if you have any problems, the process of elimination should work in your favor. And if you have any questions about the layout of counters in general, you can refer to the unit type chart. It should contain most of the answers you'll need. Unfortunately, WN and STP units do not appear on the UTC, but here is a quick breakdown of the information they contain. Okay, moving along. The entries in section 38.8.2 use abbreviations to identify counters. Most of them can be found in this list in section 40.0, but in this part of the video, I'll show you the ones you'll need for the moment and examples of the counters they refer to. To make this as easy as possible, I'll generally cover them in the order they appear here, with some exceptions where necessary, and I'll also cover any special instructions you'll need to follow. Now, just before I do, it's important to understand that all of the German forces except WN and StP units start the June 6th AM game turn inactive, and as you place them, you may want to rotate or mark the counters in some way to indicate this. I turn them all 45 degrees counterclockwise, for example. Good, let's get started. First, these two abbreviations appear throughout the initial German setup. BTN refers to battalions, which are generally distinguishable by the two bars above their unit type symbol. COY refers to company-sized units, indicated by having only one bar. Armored vehicle companies do not have a unit type symbol or bars. Instead, they have a single step dot above their vehicle silhouette. Okay, the abbreviation ART refers to artillery units, which can generally be identified by this dot in the center of their unit type symbol. And in this entry, NW refers to Nebelwerfer units, identified by this symbol. And just a few quick notes. First, for the initial German setup, all artillery and Nebelwerfer units are placed face up, meaning they begin the campaign in battery. Second, be careful not to confuse artillery with anti-tank units, which can be distinguished by this triangle. And third, this entry refers to the errata counter shown here. Alright, in these two entries, a leader's last name appears in brackets after a headquarters unit. In both cases, place the counter representing the leader in the same hex as the HQ. In the initial German setup, leaders are placed face up because they start the campaign activated, meaning no activation check is required for the June 6th game day. Next, the abbreviation INF refers to infantry units, generally identified by their X unit type symbol. There are also other infantry type units that use different abbreviations and symbols, like OST and MG, and STURM and SEC. And just a quick clarification, the last entry for the 709th Infantry Division capitalizes OST, but it's an OS battalion like any other. And finishing off the 7th Army entries, the abbreviation PZ stands for Panzer, which is used in section 38.8.2 to refer to some German armored fighting vehicle units. Alright, moving on to the 21st Panzer Division. This entry calls for a Z-step or zero-step unit. But when face up, its counter represents a one-step unit as indicated by this step dot. In order to make it a Z-step, the counter must be flipped over to its reduced side. Good. Now, the abbreviation MOT refers to motorized organic transport, represented by these two black dots under the unit type symbol. AA stands for anti-aircraft, which is indicated by the letter A as in these examples. It should be noted that the word flak is sometimes used in entries instead of AA, but the two are interchangeable for all intents and purposes. Good. Now, the next entry requires some explanation. First, the 1X indicates that one of the following breakdown units is called for. In this case, one heavy anti-aircraft Z-step counter like the one pictured. Note the difference between the Z-step and company or one-step versions. Second, the number 88 in the entry refers to heavy 88mm guns, represented by the thick black bar on the left side of the unit type symbol. Okay, next, let's take a closer look at these two entries. The one-step unit on top has been broken down into two Z-step units. The parent, or original unit, flipped over to its reduced side, and one heavy anti-aircraft breakdown unit. Now, even though there is no requirement that these two specific units ever reunite, mostly for supply and command purposes, it is necessary to track which breakdown units belong to which parent units, or, at the very least, to which higher formation HQs. To do this, you can use the number or letter printed in the upper right-hand corner of breakdown unit counters as a unit identifier. Numbers indicate one-step companies, and letters indicate Z-step breakdown units. Now, you'll need to come up with an effective system to keep track of breakdown counters because, believe me, they'll be all over the place, and the last thing you need is to be trying to figure out which units belong to which every turn. For example, I use post-it notes like these placed around the edges of the map. It just takes a few seconds to quickly jot down the parent unit, its higher formation, the letters or numbers of the breakdown counter, the type of unit, and its combat factors. In my experience, something like this will save you a lot of time in the long run. Good. Well, that's the end of part 1. As always, if you have any questions or comments, notice a mistake, or think something else should be included in the video, please let me know. Any and all feedback is appreciated. Okay, with that, thanks for watching, and see you in part 2.